now recording this as well, so this will go live on YouTube at a later date. So just want to say hi to everybody. My name's Ash, and you are in tune to the first live episode of Shifty Perspective, and we have our first live guest here, Carl H. Smith, who is a very, very, very interesting fellow that I had the honor to meet a few months back before this whole lockdown. How are you doing, Carl? You good?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, thanks. I mean, yeah, a new world order is in place, but apart from that, I'm trying to look at the positives of the current situation.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't think anybody, I mean, some people warned about it, but I don't think anybody really expected or planned for this kind of thing properly, taking everyone by surprise.
Yeah,
So
indeed. Indeed.
I guess we should start off by introducing yourself. So, Carl, do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do, really, I guess?
Yeah, sure, man. I'm an academic. I run a research center looking specifically at technology enhanced learning. So what can technology do for different subjects? I'm also very interested in consciousness and perception. You know, what is it that we can advance and amplify with these technologies? And I'm not just talking about digital technologies. I'm very interested in body tech and meditation and breathing. And I see all of those as technologies, language as a technology. So I'm very interested in looking at ancient pedagogies. You know, what is it that we can learn from the past? What is it we can learn from our very recent past when we've lost our analog abilities? We're losing our analog abilities because of the digital hacks and the digital sort of, this attention deficit disorder that's common these days, because nobody's reading anything in depth. Nobody's looking at anything in depth. It's all just, the next thing in the feed. So we're sort of being hacked by this feed. And I think that, we really need to find ways to sort of break out of this single focus and use our peripheral vision again. Like, so much we know from being out in nature that we're losing, especially in the lockdown, we're all going a bit mad.
Yeah, isolation is getting to people, definitely.
So how do we use technology in a mindful way, and and I think the current situation is that, a lot of people have been very anti-technology and now they're very dependent on it. So what are what does this flip mean for humanity? And this is going to be the new normal. So finding ways to use technology mindfully. I mean, I'm in back-to-back meetings day in, day out now, and it's almost like that's not being mindful. So I'm having all these meetings talking about what work I'm going to do, and I don't have time to do the work. So it's that kind of thing that I'm looking at all the time.
Do you see that? Is it like the more connected we get, the actually more disconnected we become? That kind of thing.
Well, I certainly think that, when we look at the typical scenario of people staring at their phones 24/7, which is this tiny bit of real estate, when we're completely, distracted from the real world, and like the love of your life is walking past and you didn't even notice because you're so sucked into this feed. So I think the ability to disconnect from that and to put the gadgets away when you need to, and to have a healthy balance between, when you're plugged into the matrix and when you're not, is something that we all need to be mindful of. I see a backlash in certain realms. Young people don't go on Facebook, and the scroll rot. But it's not just Facebook scroll rot. It's also, if you're online selling in terms of Depop, or if you're just the scroll rot is everywhere. So I think it's a case of like using technology to bar you from the space, so that these apps that grow a tree on the screen as you're not using your device, and actually if you don't use your device long enough, a full tree grows on the screen, and that means an actual tree is planted. So it's all of those kinds of little hacks that will encourage us, and we're like babies, we're very much like children, and we need to have these things taken away from us when they're becoming too addictive. And it's the corporations that are designing these things around addiction, knowing full well you know, the psychology of addiction and preying on us, you know, and it's really, you know, it's about knowing that that's what they're at.
How do you control that though? What would you suggest for, like, do you think censorship, or is this something that the corporation should self censor, or the government should step in? Because I mean, of course, it's good if someone like yourself has an app. I don't know. I've not heard of that, but that's a great thing that you can plant a tree by not using your phone. But if, you know, probably most teenagers who are on are not going to give up Instagram to plant a
Yeah,
couple of trees. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
how would you
I think,
suggest?
yeah, it's all about education. You know,
Mhm.
you need to know what's happening to you, because if your attention is being hijacked on a regular basis, then you're not going to be able to have in-depth thinking going on. And sure enough, you know, this is you know, this dependency, and it's the transhumanist debate versus what I'm looking at, which is hyperhumanism. How do we learn from, you know, the analog world that we're fast losing? How do we mix the best affordances of the analog with the best affordances of the digital? You know, what is good about the digital space
Yeah.
that we can use, but still be mindful that we need those analog skills, because without those, and the generations, you know, beneath us are actually going to have less attention. They're not going to be able to think have a deep thought, and this surface level, you know, and you're seeing it everywhere with all these conspiracy theories rising up, because people just want this sort of quick solution, this quick sort of meme, to hold on to, and they're not prepared to do the in-depth research. And it's not just cognition; it's also listening. You know, with the throwaway nature of the MP3s. You know, there's no dynamic range in the MP3. You know, you're not putting on a vinyl, as you can see behind me. You're not putting on a record
Yeah.
and actually listening to 20 minutes of music on each side. You
It's a
know,
quick fix, isn't it? So
yeah, and therefore it devalues
yeah.
the whole process, and there's no savoring. You're not savoring anything. It's all just take away knowledge, take away, you know, take away food, and there's nothing nourishing about it.
Yeah, I agree. But I just don't know how we can really make a change, or how people can actually, if you're not consciously aware of it before, how,
Mm,
yeah, I guess educating people is the right way.
yeah.
And by doing things like this, talking about it, uh, hopefully the educators themselves become aware of it. Because I think, you know, teachers are going to have to teach children.
Mm,
The amount of time kids spend on devices is absolutely insane. Like,
yeah.
it's shocking when you see, you know, 18 hours, 16 or 16 hours of the day, children are on Instagram. I was listening to um, uh, I can't remember who it was the other day. There was a podcast on, and somebody was breaking down the data of Generation Z versus millennials, and all the different generations, and how much actual internet time is spent. And I think it's about 12 hours a day on social media under
Mm.
the age of 25-year-olds spend, which is just, I mean, it's got to be doing something negative, I'm guessing, dampening their awareness and their cognition.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true, and I'm very much interested in, you know, mixed reality technologies, because if you look at Pokemon Go, I mean, it was an absurd use case going around chasing monsters, but 147 million people downloaded it,
Whoa.
and actually everyone was outside, you know, and not inside. They weren't looking at screens. They were obviously outside in the world. They're still looking at screens, but they're in the world. And if you can actually utilize that kind of technology to get people and go and recycle, or get people to go and
Hmm.
vote, or get people to learn how to, you know, what products in the shops are ethically sourced, what products in the shops are actually, you know, destroying the Amazon. So, you know, using that ethical consumer, you know, the ethical barcode. So every barcode is something that you can actually find out if this product is bad, and you turn it into a behavior. So you go into, you know, this is one of the projects I'm working on, which is with this company called Geeky app, which basically, yeah, does that exact thing. So you're clicking on a barcode, and if you're a kid in the front of your trolley with your parents, you know, and your parents are too busy to even notice or what's going on, or they're just usually buying whatever they buy. But if the kids are in there scanning each of the objects and actually saying, no, mum, you can't buy that because it's implicated in this
Wow.
destruction. And actually you could take it a step further. My friend Danny Namu came up with this idea that you could actually hear, the app could actually start a chainsaw going, so that then other people come up to you and go, what's the chainsaw? And actually it's that product, and the chainsaw is the indication that it's destroying the Amazon. So you get the younger generations to sort of like out their parents and say, actually 70% of the products that you bought today are destroying the planet, and find alternatives. So it's those sort of solutions where I'm very well aware that we're not going to go down the Luddite route and get rid of technology.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. And as you cite, there's so many people immersed in these technologies. So let's use them for it's the tech for good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, basically, how do we use it for tech for good?
Just to go back a bit, you mentioned, you said about transhumanism and hyperhumanism. Just for anyone who's listening who isn't aware of these terms, could you just break down what is transhumanism, what is hyperhumanism?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I did a back-to-back keynote with Ray Kurzweil, who's a big transhumanist.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I kind of like look to see, what is this all about really? And transhumanism is all about a dependency on technology, where we're merging the technologies. If you think about Elon Musk's Neuralink, where he's talking about direct brain interface to the internet. And for me, that's pretty scary, because one of the things about virtual reality, mixed reality, is you've always got the choice of taking it off. If you're having something placed over your brain and it's already being tested on monkeys, you're not going to have a choice. And I think that's the utter dependency that transhumanists represent. I mean, a lot of the time they're looking at, interesting application areas, but for me, I think that technology should always be a catalyst for enhancing your own innate abilities. And that's why I talk about the analog all the time. So I'll give you a nice example. So I work with these guys called Cyborg Nest, and they came up with the North Sense chip, which is just basically a chip you wear on your chest, and it vibrates every time you face north, right? So it's simple. It's very simple bit of technology, and it gives you that north sense, so you know where north is. And if you know where north is, then you know the rest of your directions. And that's interesting because we're all completely sucked into GPS, and we don't know where we are without GPS. We've got no sense of direction.
It's crazy.
Yeah, utterly dependent. Same with spell checkers. These things they're destroying our cognition. They're destroying our ability to be in the world, and they're destroying you could argue, our humanity. So hyperhumanism, on the other hand, is looking specifically at, like the stabilizers on your bike. You use them for 3 months when you're a kid, and then you have the skill of cycling around after you've removed them, right? So it's like that. So with the North Sense example, I always cite the Feel Space belt, which gives you the same new skill. So it's a belt that you wear 6 to 8 weeks. It's got vibration motors in it. It vibrates. You know where north is from wearing that belt. And the idea is that you take off the belt and you have that new sense without the technology. So it's seeing technology as something that you use for a short period of time. I've got a friend who doesn't go to the internet when he wants to answer questions. He tries to find the answer out without using the global brain. He tries.
That's difficult.
Yeah, it is, and it's I admire that, because it's that exact example where you're not dependent on the quick fix. It's you do your hard, you do you go there if you just can't do anything else. But I'm really interested in technology not becoming a dependency. I mean, the other thing about transhumanism is that they're obsessed with life extension, living forever, immortality. And not only is it completely absurd, I mean, it's also, we know we're living in a resource sensitive planet. The resources are finite, and at the moment we don't have, Elon wants to get us to Mars or whatever. We're destroying this planet, and it's not necessarily a wise thing for us to be allowed out of the cage to go and destroy other planets. So I'm really, I'm just very much thinking that humans need to rise up and to take responsibility. And I think that, you know, what's going on with the COVID virus is a big opportunity for us to grow up, because
Yeah.
the promises of the internet did not materialize. In fact, it went very badly wrong. So now that we're all on Zoom, now that we're finding new ways to connect, I was in a meeting just before this one all about the fact is that, you know, we're, you know, this Zoom idea that we've got this sort of everyone on the page, it's like a virtual campfire, everyone's at the same distance, everyone's like, you know, it's like normally you know, reserved for the romantic gaze when you can look into somebody's eyes and all of that kind of stuff. So it's an unusual shift, and it's you know, it's more like a mycelium operating system, you know. And I think the
big network.
Yeah, exactly. And it's decentralized, and it's like the mycelium are really interesting. You know, the mushroom has like survived 5 mass extinctions, and we're causing the 6th. So how do we learn from something that's more intelligent than us, that has a bigger consciousness than us, that shares its resources when it has too much? You know, what are the things that we can learn from the mycelium and adopt at this critical juncture where we're being, you know, we're being sent to Mother Nature's sending us to our rooms, and to think about what we've done.
Do you not think that maybe something similar with the Neuralink though does that? It would connect us together.
That's a good question. I mean, I think that absolutely it may do that, but also it's a double-edged sword like every other technology. And that technology, if your thoughts are no longer your own, I mean, I'll give you another example, which is there's this technology which your voice box, every time you have a thought, you're actually orating that. There's tiny micro movements in your voice box which you can reverse engineer and actually get that thought. So there's this mad researcher who's looking at in dreams being able to reverse engineer what you're saying in your dreams from the micro movements that are occurring in your voice box. So even when you're asleep, you're still orating. So this for me
is it passing through your voice box though, or
yeah,
is this?
Well, it's these micro movements. There's a I can send you an application where it's a bit like Neuralink. So it's like you just think, and then
it just does.
It just does. So, you know, one of my dear friends, Kim Veltman, passed recently, and he was always warning me about this, you know, consciousness hacking. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, we've got to be super careful because our privacy is being eroded all the time, and the technologies that we allow, that we adopt, will dictate the story that's coming. And, you know, it's all about the storytelling. It's all about what reality do we want to build. And, you know, we're already giving away so much. We can see sweeping new laws that the surveillance state is now gaining massive advantage because of this situation we're in. So we just need to be, it's all about education.
Yeah. Do you think with the saying about the sweeping new laws and everything with the current situation, do you reckon it's going to be, well, I guess it probably will be a temporary measure until after, but then that temporary measure stays in place, and, you know, slowly over time, it will be the norm that, you know, we'll have to have these restrictions, or can you see, or do you think that we will just go back to how it was before?
I don't see any of it going back to normal. I mean, I know a lot of people that are working in the festivals game, and they're all saying that this is not, and I actually don't think we should go back to normal. You know, I think that the whole traveling to Mexico for the weekend just because you can from Europe or whatever is a disaster for the planet. And, you know, all of this superfluous traveling to conferences, when the telepresence solutions, you know, the internet becoming the Ready Player One, where we're all in a virtual space, you know, again, massive double-edged swords. But, you know, I think that these technologies, you know, VR's been sort of trying to hit the mainstream for so many times, and actually this may be the actual time it does hit the mainstream, because
this is something like you've been working on, right, with the holotech.
Holoportal. Yeah, we built a holoportal at Ravensbourne where I work. And yeah, that turns matter into light. So we're creating holograms for the Microsoft HoloLens, and for any sort of context. So you basically walk into this big space, this room, and it captures, you know, you've got the cameras above, and they're capturing 4 views, and then those are stitched together. So whatever you're doing, you have that as a hologram, and Skype will go in that direction. You know, we all sit there and we look at our, you know, our family members in 2D, but we were looking at, we did this project called Harrison's Fund, which was looking at, this was with my friends at they're called the Play Labs, led by my dear friend James Edward Marks, and you know, it was a disabled kid who couldn't get out to go visit his granddad. So his granddad came as this light being to him, and that sense of presence and that sense of connection was so much vaster. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, you know, being able to sit around and look through our holographic eyes and hear through our holographic ears. And now you've got touchable holograms.
Really?
Yeah. So you could actually, like, you know, give each other a hug and stuff. So I think that I've always been wary of these kinds of technologies as well, because you don't want to encourage remoteness, or we've never wanted to encourage remoteness. You know, you can do all this crazy stuff, like you can like kiss your partner through your phone, and you can, you know, you can taste your meal before you get to the restaurant electronically. You know, all of these stuff, all this stuff's already possible. So but I really think it's a case of, you know, what of these technologies should we be going and funding and encouraging? But for me personally, you know, I've done far too much traveling. I've done far too much, you know, air miles in terms of carbon costs and everything else. And I honestly think if we can have that sense of presence, because the reason why people go to conferences is because they want that sense of presence, right? They want to feel a connection.
And engage. It's important. I think really is important for our psychological well-being. You see this, like, going back again to the situation right now, you know, people are getting quite crazy, stir crazy. So I think it is important to have actual connection. If you think the technology will increase to the point where it is pretty much the same. I mean, like, when you're talking about having a hologram, what level of clarity would it be right now? So the technology. So just thinking off the top of my head, Star Wars is probably, if I think of the holograms in Star Wars when they show up, what kind of clarity would you have at the moment in comparison to that?
How many cameras you're using. I mean, ours is quite lo-fi because it's free. I mean, people can come in and use it for free, whereas you've got Dimension Studio down the road in Wimbledon, and there's this very, very high res, much higher res than anything you'd see on Star Wars, and it's for film and TV and broadcasting and whatever else. So the technology is already there. It's a question of what do you want to do with it, really? I mean, you know, if you are talking, I mean, again, the whole 5G thing rears its head again, because these technologies are massively going to be enabled by 5G, and there's a lot of controversy around it. I mean, I personally, I don't believe the hype. I mean, all this madness about corona was caused by 5G is absurd, and you know, but we do need to make sure that these things are checked thoroughly for their health effects. You know, it's the same with virtual reality. People putting on VR headsets. I'm working on.
Oh, hello. Hey, I've lost you there. Oh,
I'm back.
Oh, there you are. You're back. Cool. Okay.
So
you're working on ahead.
Yeah. So Mark Farid had he was looking at privacy as well as a debate. So his thing was all around this theme of what's, you know, if I wanted to wear virtual reality for a month and look through somebody else. So he's not got access to his own eyes or his own hearing. He's literally
the guy you wore for, I saw in your speech. Yes, you wore for a day.
Right. That's right. So the test run was 10 people in 10 days. And he wore like a 70-year-old lady one day, and then me another day, and then an 18-year-old for another day. And it was just to see how it would work out. You know, would he burn his eyes out, for instance, if you're, because it's the equivalent of staring at a TV for a month at a fixed distance. So what you actually need to do is cleverly record at multiple depths of view, so that your eyes don't burn out, for instance. So there's a lot of, it took 5 years to actually get the technology to the right state. And but his point was all around, you know, this idea of privacy. So he did a project called Data Shadow before Seeing Eye, and during Data Shadow he basically gave away all of his passwords to all of his social media, so his bank account as well as his phone. He literally gave it away to all these journalists. And you know, I was in the audience, and I'd forgotten he was going to do it, but as he was passing around this A4 sheet with all his passwords, I logged into his Facebook, got his Facebook. I logged into his Twitter, I got his Twitter. I should have logged into his Hotmail and got that, because that was his master account. But and then I put my hand up and said, "Oh, I've got your Facebook, got your Twitter." He's furious. He's like, "But I know you. That was not the plan." I was like, I didn't know there was a plan, Mark.
Yeah, if you give it away, you give it away, right?
Exactly. And what was super interesting about it was that he was in the pub afterwards. He's like, "Oh, can you give me my Facebook data, please?" Because I forgot to download it. But he also said, "Use it. You know, use the account. Like, try and look at my account. Like, look at my messages." And actually, it was super interesting, because it was the closest I've ever got to actually hacking somebody's subjective state. Because I was seeing how he was chatting to his mum, how he was chatting to his friends, how he was chatting to his mates, how he was chatting to his girlfriend, how he was flirting with other girls. And it was like, I was, you know, able to be hacking that to a certain extent. You don't normally get that privileged point of view. But he was, you know, it's like, what if a new form of prison? And you've seen this in Black Mirror. And I mean, one of my friends said to me, "Oh, I had a terrible nightmare the other day where I was in VR, and I was actually inside a terrorist's point of view. I was in this terrorist body, and I was witnessing all these atrocities, what was going on." Because like, your brain, when you're in a VR space, I mean, I tried this one called Ricky's Plank Experience recently, where you go into a hotel and you go up to the top of the hotel, and elevator opens, and you're fully embodied, because you're not tethered. It's like a headset where you walk around. You can easily walk around, and then you're meant to walk onto this plank, and it literally looks like you're in New York, and then you have to drop off the plank. And I was like, your brain's going, "Don't do it, don't do it," because it's full. You know, your peripheral vision is, you know, it's being removed. So it
feels real.
It feels entirely real, which is why these technologies are so powerful. You know, it's a question of, you know, in terms of the recent, when we met, I was over there working on the 5-MeO DMT study with Brid and Rudy and Imperial and all the rest of them. And you know, and one of the things I'm really interested in is with the psychedelic experience, how can you help with preparation for such an experience? An entheogen even more so. It's even more important to be prepared for what you're going to go through, and how do you integrate? And so, you know, I've been talking to Robin Carhart-Harris and Chris Timmerman, and looking to see how can technology help with such a thing. And one of the big entry requirements for doing a 5-MeO DMT experience is letting go. And letting go is not a cognitive thing; it's an embodied feeling thing. You have to feel it, that you feel like you're letting go. But when I tried this Ricky's Plank experience, I was literally letting go, and I had to jump off this building, and I did it loads and loads of times. And I was like, wow, this is a brilliant example of going through that experience of letting go, you know. And then you sort of, you fall down with actual gravity, and you smash into the ground. There's a whiteout. And so it's things like that where I'm like, that is a great example of utilizing VR for a positive purpose. And, you know, and I think with the whole Mark thing, it's, you know, what if people are going to want to be in VR for a month and be somebody else?
Because that will happen.
Of course it will. And, you know, probably famous people will share their view, you know, and there'll be a pay-per-view. You pay-per-view whoever, and you get their tailored view for the day or whatever they want you to see. But people will want to, just like in Ready Player One, and, you know, people are very restricted in their lives, and people don't necessarily want to be who they are. They want to be someone else. I mean, if you've seen the Ready Player One idea, you know, you get to be whoever you want to be. You get to be whatever sex you want to be, whatever age you want to be, whatever body shape you have. you know, and when you look at something like the hikikomori in Japan, where 500,000 people have already logged out of society and are already in isolation by choice, you know, having all of their food delivered, is mostly young men.
Really?
Yeah.
This is complete. They're just living with essentially in a cyber world and just having everything
Yeah,
delivered.
absolutely. And this has been going on for decades.
Holy shit.
That's because, you know, Japanese culture is no joke. It's an incredibly tough
Yeah.
sort of world, because you are a slave to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And what's amazing, what's going on right now, is even those Japanese men are at home and they're obviously loving it, because it's not this, you know, it doesn't matter if you're asleep in the office. It doesn't matter if you're entirely inefficient because you're completely exhausted, as long as you're in the office, because it's all about honor. It's all about, and this is why people choose to not do it. They say, "Is it bullshit? I'm not going to be part of it."
It is crazy. It's
yeah.
I went there 2 years ago, and I went out a few times and saw some what they call them, salary men.
Yeah.
And I spoke to them, you know, at bars where they were after work, and this idea of you join the company and you are there for life, and this is you can't even talk to your colleagues in a you know, a human way. Everything is just one like they've just got this tunnel vision for honor for the company, and it's so much pressure. So then you see them on the trains, and you think it's bad in the UK or in Europe, where people on their phones, you know, on the trains, everyone has like their headsets on and they're playing these video games on the train the whole time.
Yeah.
It's crazy, really crazy.
Yeah. So I think that's the world that's coming if we're not very careful, and we don't make the world a place where people want to be, you know, where they want to live, because life is tough and life is full of you know, opportunities to escape. And that's why I'm really interested in this idea of double consciousness. And you know, if we think about a traditional shaman, a shaman is, you know, he's in the astral. Quite often, if you're going to a shaman to be healed, you're actually, you know, it's not you that will take the psychedelic, it's the shaman, and the shaman will actually go through your body astrally and actually cure you. It will find the blockages or whatever.
Yeah.
But the shaman's also in the real world, right? So he's in two places in parallel. And that's what we're seeing with cyberspace, right? You're in a VR headset, you know, you're in the physical world, but you're also very much in this other world, you know. And you know, other examples of that, I mean, it's like, you know, dream hacking, you know, the technology. I mean, I know this stuff's still yet to be proven, but using transcranial stimulation whilst you're in REM. So when you're in a dreaming state and you apply a small amount of electricity to the left or the right angular gyrus, you can reliably create lucid dream states. So if you're
crazy.
So that again means that you're you know, you're in this world, but you're also able to be conscious in the dream state. And if we can reliably create dream states, like lucid dream states, I mean, the average person has one lucid dream, if you're lucky, in a life.
Yeah.
There are people that train and train and train, and obviously I'm not taking away from any of that ability to train. I think that if you can do it and it doesn't take you your whole life to do it, then that's the best way to go. But if you can use technology as a catalyst to get you there, and to, you know, because there's all this stuff where people are saying that, you know, it's this dream yoga idea that if you practice some martial arts in a dream, it's 4 times more effective than doing it in reality. Because
that's very similar on the Matrix, right? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that idea is, obviously it's been put out there. Is there any? Have you seen any proof of this, or have you?
Well,
Do you know
I
anyone
know
who's done it?
people. I know lucid dreamers, and I know that they do. I mean, the reason why you could say it's more effective is because you have to apply gravity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first time one of my friends was trying to do Tai Chi in a dream, and he said, you know, the first 20 times he would just float off the ground. So, you know, it's not just you that you're focusing on; it's the entire context.
Because you built the whole context.
Yeah, you built the context, which feeds into my idea around context engineering. So, you know, the idea that what we're moving into is not a content-based economy anymore, where we're just fed information in this feed, which is destroying us and destroying our humanity, but actually focusing on how you change the way you perceive reality. And that, you know, there's a myriad of different technologies, a lot of them transhumanist, a lot of them hyperhumanist, where you're able to change the way you perceive, and that becomes the new content. So it's the context becoming the content. And for me, that's much more, you know, because we all want experiences. We're not, you know, this constant, you know, you see it with Punch Drunk, all this immersive theater, a lot of it now, we want to be in the film. We don't just want to watch a film, we want to be in it. And that's why gaming is taking more revenues than cinema, because people want to be involved. They want to see how they can immerse themselves. And
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. But also you've got things like, you know, 360 vision. You know, I tried this helmet for a week where you literally get a new visual system.
How does that work?
So it just takes a street view camera, 360 street view camera, and you're wearing glasses, and what you'd normally see in 180 degrees, you're actually seeing 360. So I've worn this for a week, and actually, you know, you can see in 360 within 15 minutes, and your brain was like, well, why didn't you do that before?
So you wore this for a week whilst you were doing your everyday life. You were going to work, you know, go to the toilet, etc. Just
people were like chucking balls at me, and I would catch them from behind because I would see them coming, just and be able to, you know, it takes a while to adjust, but that's what I mean. So the brain itself is a black box, and it will take new inputs, and it will adjust to those new sensory inputs. So, you know, what do we want to build? You know, what is it that is useful for us? What is not the technocentric perspective where we just create technologies because we can and then look for a problem to solve? What is actually the human-centric perspective? What is it that we need to solve and rapidly solve? Because, you know, the COVID crisis is, you know, like this, and then the economic crisis is coming, which is much bigger, and then the climate crisis is
even bigger.
Yeah. So, you know, let's get AIs working on the climate crisis. Let's not be doing business as usual. Let's not, you know, go back to normal.
No, I agree. I think that people are panicking about COVID right now, and it's very short. I'm not trying to underplay the situation, but it's very short-sighted that this is the thing right now. So this is the most important thing, but they don't realize that, the knock-on effect of this, like you said, the knock-on effect to, when I say the economy, I don't mean from a capitalist perspective of, oh, we're going to lose money. I mean, you know, the knock-on effect to the economy in the sense of, you know, possibly millions of people dying of hunger, of destitution, of not being able to afford healthcare. Like, you know, in the 2008 financial crisis, I think in America, 500,000 people died of cancer in the 2 years that wouldn't have died of cancer normally, because they couldn't, because of the effect of that knocking on. Yeah. So I think we have to take into account the bigger picture, and then even protecting this whole thing of the economy or people surviving. That is no good if the world's dead. You know, like you said, if the climate collapses. So we need to really not just look into things short-sightedly and just think what's in front of us. We got to step out and I guess look at it in a 360 view, like rather than.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, but we don't want to be voyeuristic about other people's suffering. I mean, people talked about VR as an empathy engine, and it's not. It's really not. If you're just plugging into a refugee's plight and you're looking at it and you're listening to it, you're not invested. Your context is not invested. You're not experiencing enough of the context. You're just voyeuring. And I think that, you know, how can we change that? How can we make sure that you feel what they're feeling? And again, that gets us into dangerous territory. But there's a brilliant game called was referenced this one called Bloodsport, where you're not just linked up to a visual and auditory signal, you're also linked up to a drip. So when you get shot in the game, and this is a ridiculous use case, but when you get shot in the game, actual blood is taken from your body.
What?
So you're actually like, you know, a typical gamer's scenario, but it's sort of last man standing wins because you've fainted from blood loss. But then all the blood is donated to the blood bank. So you know, everyone's a winner. The gamers are happy because there's a real investment. and society benefits. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek example, but you get
You might lose a few gamers, maybe. I
well,
mean,
no, because you faint before anything bad happens, and there are ways around it. But I mean, that was a Kickstarter that got banned when it got funded. So
oh, that's quite interesting, actually.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm also, I mentioned hyperhumanism, but I'm also very much interested in all the non-human life that's on this planet that's being decimated. So how do we plug into these different umwelts? I talked about the mycelium and trying to, like, what would it be like to sense like a mycelium network, or to sense like a forest, and that's where I think technology can really help get us into that perspective.
I mean, that's already happening more with mammals, right? So we're already having. I've not looked too much into it, but I've seen some of these dog helmets which they're developing to, so we can actually vocalize dogs' thoughts, and eventually they're thinking that we can connect to basically any mammals at some point, and we can feel what they need, what they know, what they're saying, so we can actually get a connection with them. So I
Yeah.
think it's something that's happening, but sadly, unless there's financial gain from internet, it can be commercialized, then I imagine it's a slow process. Like, I mean, you're a researcher, so I'm guessing what it's like when you want to follow a certain topic, but you need to have the funds, and only companies aren't going to invest because they can't sell it.
Well, I mean, this is it. And I think that obviously, massive use case if people can start to communicate with their animals, but they already do. So again, it's like, we don't want to use technology to replace the analog ability that people already have. And telepathy is real. People do communicate with the non-human species, and I think that's where it becomes a double-edged sword. That's where it becomes the hyperhumanist thing. Use it as a catalyst to get you to communicate better with your plants. We can use radionics to listen to plants, for instance. But and that's why the psychedelics are super interesting, because they open up this brain of ours, which is actually not your friend to a certain extent. It's built to keep you alive, but it massively reduces the dynamic range of your perception. We only experience 1% of the auditory spectrum. We only experience 1% of the visual spectrum. What else is there that we're not getting to see because of the way our brain has evolved? And that's what I'm saying. The brain is a black box. How can we know the limits on the bandwidth? What are the dangers when we overload the brain? But also, it's super interesting when they found out, and this is why I love working with Imperial, because when we realized that the brain is a reducing valve, that actually when you take these psychedelics, brain activity decreases. It's super interesting, and when we look at things like DMT and this parallel world that exists, and people say it's just your brain, or it's just brain activity. I'm not a materialist. I don't believe consciousness is produced in the brain. I think the brain is the product, and all materiality is produced from consciousness. So how can we really access more of the realities that are out there?
So you're saying we're plugging into to the ether, essentially. And do you
Who
think
knows? Who knows, man? I mean, I think that, the DMT realms, having been part of the Imperial study, where I'm in an fMRI scanner, having intravenous DMT, the most insane things happen, because I see such a vast amount of entities arriving on the scene, all of them completely concerned for me. Expressing their concern to me, and I'm like trying to calm them down, which is not the normal scenario.
But you're lying down, not moving. This is all internal, right? At this point, you're lying down
absolutely.
in an fMRI scanner.
Yeah,
but you've got a full dose of. Just so anyone who's listening who doesn't know about DMT, and you also mentioned 5-MeO DMT as well. DMT is dimethyltryptamine. and 5-MeO DMT is actually, well, they're both very strong psychedelics. DMT occurs in many living things, and 5-MeO DMT originally was taken from a kind of toad, but we can synthesize it now, so not killing off the toads, because it was actually causing quite a problem. But these psychedelics are very powerful tools. DMT in itself is really short-lived when you take it as a drug. It's illegal to take, but I'm guessing you having it for this study, you had it intravenously, so they were able to keep it going, or?
Yeah, no, that's a later study, the DMTX, where they're trying to extend the duration, because it's it's super interesting. I mean, for instance, I see this language, the core of my vision, and what I'm seeing is this holographic realm. It's like everything's made of light, much like with the holoportal, where I'm turning things into holograms, in matter into light. What I see in DMT realm, in NN-DMT realm, is everything as holograms, everything as this holographic light. And also I see this language, which is persistent in this sort of circular structure at the core of my vision. I'm seeing this hieroglyphs, sort of ancient and modern at the same time, and it's there every time I do it. So I want to sit there and actually draw it, if this DMTX actually works out. Wow. But yeah, when you compare, what we live in normal reality, we have the sun, and the sun hits objects, and the light is illuminating things. In NN-DMT, I'm seeing light, objects made of light. But when you take 5-MeO DMT, you become the light source. So it seems to me that there's degradations of light, where you're going from the sort of the top of the Christmas tree of the
sun.
Yeah. Well, no, because the 5-MeO, you are the light. You become eternal, you become infinite, and you're the source of light. And then, next layer down is the NN-DMT, where you're seeing light beings, everything's made of light. And then the next layer down, you're back in reality. So I'm very interested in the differences between these different substances, in terms of what happens to light in those different spaces.
How do you study this? Like, I mean, if you come up with theories around this, or this, it's something that interests you, as a scientist, how do you take that and actually, especially when it comes down to drugs, essentially, which are, a pretty taboo thing, how do you research this?
Well, this is a great question, and it's one of those things where we're seeing the absurdities of even mushrooms in the UK are Schedule 1 Class A's, and heroin and cocaine are Schedule 2 Class A's. So something like mushrooms, which has clearly got medical benefits because it's killing depression in people. I mean, an interesting study at the moment with Imperial, where they're actually looking at a comparison study with SSRIs, which you have to take daily. And not very effective, 30% effective in people, and most of the time it seems to be that they just regulate sleep, and that's why you don't have such a bad problem with depression. But something like an entheogen, a large dose entheogen, or a mushroom experience, can reveal the truth to you in a one-shot deal, and then you don't need to touch anything ever again. So the absurdities of the legality of this stuff is madness. But yeah, I mean, how do we study that? I mean, it's a super interesting question, because if you look at what's going on with these brain imaging studies, they're looking to see what's going on with what parts of the brain are being having blood flow, and how much blood is in specific parts of the brain. So what does that give you actually? And a lot of it's only relevant if it's combined with the anecdotal reports that people give you. So for me, if you're not actually studying this stuff experientially yourself, you can't know from the brain imaging studies, from all of that enough. So that's my perspective on it.
The problem is I guess getting actual people's opinions changed on I guess the use of psychedelics, and the potential benefits doesn't really, it's hard to do without like clinical trials or clinical studies, or that's what people want to hear, before they believe things, I guess. But I don't know how it is in the UK now. From what I've been told from other scientists that I've spoken to, things have been a lot more difficult since the NPS, since the psychoactive substance bill. It's made it really difficult to study all different substances, and whether that's for therapeutic or medicinal effects of them. Obviously, I'm in the Netherlands, which actually has some great, Maastricht University, Utrecht University, all are doing various studies on psychedelics and on different compounds. How is it in the UK with that?
Yeah, I mean, the psychoactive ban's been absurd, as you can imagine, and it's a real shame. But I think there are people, working on getting, at least the mushroom research rescheduled, so that that stuff can be used, and you don't have to spend a fortune trying to get the stuff made in a lab. I mean, same with MDMA. I mean, there's a lot of work going into policy change, and I really admire those people trying, because these things can really help people with PTSD, with absolutely awful depression, and and it's cruel if you're stuck on these pharmaceutical drugs which are known not to work. It's a crying shame.
Yeah. I just saw the time. We've already run over from what you said. Is that your friends are?
I've got to help my friend move some stuff. But absolute pleasure, my friend, to catch up.
Absolutely amazing, really amazing to talk to you, man. Like, can't wait to do this again, and hopefully next time it will be when the lockdown is lifted, and hopefully next time we can have some kind of VR headset, and we can really sit next to each other.
Let's see what happens, man. But yeah, pleasure to see you, and thanks so much for the invite. And
No
let's do it again. Let's have a part 2 sometime.
Definitely. Speak to you soon. Cheers. Thanks.
That's fun. Take it easy.